Welcome to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast, presented by FantasyGolfBag.com, your number one source for the most in-depth PGA Tour analysis in the daily fantasy and sports betting world. Each week, our experts will discuss everything you need to know, from the course preview and key stats to top plays, fades, and strategies. Whether golf betting, grinding out cash games, or playing for a big GPP win, our team has you covered. Let's get after it.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Fantasy Golf Bag Podcast. I'm your host, Redkacheek. Joining me this evening will be Mr. JkrayASU, the familiar voice and face of the FGB live stream on Wednesday nights. But with the kind of double down schedule, I guess, we got going into the British Open with PGA Tour events and the Euro Tour events, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Jacob has I have the pleasure of Jacob joining me. So, Jacob, how's everything been going, man? I know you've been away on some vacation, but hopefully you're excited for some DFS PGA this week.
I definitely am, Drew. It's good to be back on the podcast. And, I had two weeks of vacation, so that was nice. Trying to get back into the swing of things. Did have a few lineups in the last few weeks, really just some light stuff. But excited to sort of jump into this event with the, is it the 3M Open, I guess is the official title of it, in Minnesota. And I hear it's really similar to, or it will be similar style to the last week in that, it's fairly unknown course, but should play pretty easy, high scores. Low scores. Pardon me, low scores. But looking forward to it, to dig in into some players with you and hopefully give everybody some good info here. Yeah. Try to do some digging on the Champions Tour. That was the last time we've seen this event, and it was hosted there for a number of years, actually, on the Champions Tour. And obviously, this course is going to play quite a bit longer. Different types of players, obviously, playing this week. But I did try to look at that, so I'll bring that up in just a moment. But yeah, I'm excited. 3M, I think it's Feinberg that keeps talking about this glorified, is it the swing season? Glorified swing season, I think, like the fall swing. It's pretty much right. I mean, the fields aren't that strong. We got some good players in this one. We had some okay ones last week, namely like DJ, but he missed the cut. I mean, these fields aren't really that strong. They're courses that guys are shooting 20 under par. It certainly feels like a fall swing type of event, like last week and again this week, from what I can hear. The Champions Tour obviously tore up this golf course when they played it. I expect a lot of the same this week, but there's certainly more trouble, I think, this week than there was last week. There's a lot more water, and if you're driving it poorly this week, I think you can be much more penalized than last week. Obviously, last week was some trees, but I mean, the penalty of hitting it in water versus behind a tree is, we'll say a stroke and a half on average. So, yeah, you're kind of excited for that, and then kind of to touch on the European side of things. So as we lead into the British Open coming up soon, I know we made the announcement probably a month and a half ago where now Fantasy Golf Bag offers PGA Tour DFS content and stats, and we also offer European Tour DFS content and stats. So you can find the Euro Tour rolling stats on the website. And with that being said, starting this week, a lot of guys are starting to head over to, I think it's the Irish Open, or is it the Scottish Open this week? Now I don't remember. Irish first.
Is it the Irish first?
I believe so.
I'll check it. Got to get that right for the people, because I'm pretty sure Scotland's second, so I think you're right. If my phone will load. Irish Open. So Irish Open this week. Then some decent contests, nothing crazy, and then there'll be some bigger contests hopefully again next week. But with that being said, the whole point of this little spiel is Axis and Skylar will be doing a special Euro podcast tomorrow. Me and Jacob are recording on Monday night. You can find our podcast. You found our podcast because you're listening to it. You can find their podcast the same place. So you can find that after you listen to this and build some lineups. And of course, all the tools
and stuff is found at fantasygolfbag.com. So I know Skylar and Axis are big on the European Tour. It's fun to watch. I mean, they're all about it. They've already hit, I think, 3 or 4 outrights on the Euro Tour, 2 of them being Guido Migliozzi. So I know they're pumped for it. They always like kind of getting together for the Euro Tour preview. So happy to have Jacob on this week for us just to do a normal PGA show, but definitely check out the Euro stuff. It'll help you as you try to get a grasp on the field and some of the stats that the guys are seeing going into the British Open. Okay.
Yeah, sounds good to me.
Yeah, no, I'm definitely putting some in. This is a busy week for DFS, man. I mean, we were talking about it today because Wimbledon started. I'm not a very good tennis player, but my brother and sister were, so definitely love me some Wimbledon, and they have some big contests throughout the week for Wimbledon. And then obviously PGA and then the Euro stuff. It's a busy week, so excited to get this rolling. We'll go ahead and dive into the course. Not a lot to dwell on from last week. I know we don't really talk about last week's stuff very much anyways. It seems like somewhat of a moot point. I mean, people watch it and they talk about it on Twitter. There's really no reason for us to recap it, but definitely a shout out to Nate Lashley on that win. I mean, that's awesome. 6th alternate to win going away, and now you're pretty much set for, at least a couple years, if not the rest of your life, because he's so talented. And then the story that he had from, was it 7 years ago or something, 10 years ago? I mean, it's super sad, but that was a really cool win. It was so different, too, seeing him win, because it was like, sometimes these guys get added in late and, maybe you don't have a chance. Like, I've already heard several people say they've been betting on Lashley all year. And, I mean, he's been longer odds and he's a good player. And this week, a lot of the books missed him or they were late to add him in, which is totally understandable. But I don't think anyone was really pissed about not hitting him as an outright just because it was such a good victory for him, as a golfer on the PGA Tour. So I think it was just an all-around good week for, our community, obviously, but just golf in general for a guy like that to come out, get his tour card, get his first tour win going away in style. I really like seeing that.
Yeah, and I think in general it was just everyone rooting for him. That
Correct.
Was what was so good to see. All the time we often hear people with their outrights and their plays and who's touting who, but he wasn't even available on DK, and even if he had been, he probably wouldn't have been owned as much as people say. But regardless of that fact, just to see the community come together and everyone, like you said, it was an incredible display from him, and to win in the fashion that he did, everything he's overcome, just kudos to him for sure. It was awesome to see.
Yep, and another quick shout out to Gas Boat 1. I think his name is Chris Foster. Finished 3rd in the club tour, I believe, for like $40,000. I know he's been a loyal listener of the podcast since he started PGA DFS this year in January, and he's already, taken down our listener league a couple times, and then now won 40 Gs. That's a pretty nice introduction to PGA DFS. So definitely wanted to give him a shout out. That was cool to see. I think it was on like $200 or $400 in entry fees, something like that. So pretty nice little return there.
Oh yeah.
So we'll try to keep that run going. I mean, since the second place at the Millie Maker for the U.S. Open, it's been a good couple weeks. So hopefully this week we can continue it. So I'll go ahead and introduce the golf course. I'm sure you guys have heard it everywhere. But this is the 3M Open. It'll be played at TPC Twin Cities. If you look at the scorecard on the PGA Tour site, I've heard people see differing pars and yardage, but the course will play to a par 71. I think number 4 is moved into a par 4 from a par 5 that it normally plays. It's going to be 7,468 yards. Bent grass greens. There's a good number of water hazards. I think there's 27 that come into play on this golf course. So certainly a golf course which we can probably talk to a little bit. But when I did look at the Champions Tour stuff, and again, I understand it's the Champions Tour, versus the 2019 PGA Tour players. Driving distance isn't going to be necessarily the same thing, but I did notice that driving accuracy lead-in form was pretty substantial. So I think that this golf course, depending on how the bluegrass rough plays, if guys are spraying it, I think driving accuracy is actually a decent bump this week. I think off the tee, with it being a longer golf course, is important. So I would certainly be weighing off the tee. It's the most I've weighed in the last couple weeks, and I'll say that. I bumped approach down a little bit. I think this is a pretty easy approach course, so I'm not really looking so much at. I include strokes gained approach. I include a lot of these stats just to kind of weed out guys that are doing bad. Like I'm not necessarily weighing them so high where I just want the best in that category. But a lot of times I'll weigh, like I mentioned, green and regulation every week. A lot of times just taking out the guy that sucks is a good step forward. I mean, take out the guy that's hitting 45% of his greens and he's not even the top 50% of your model. That's a pretty good starting point, in my opinion. So approach is in there, but it's not as high as it has been the last couple weeks. Strokes gained off the tee is certainly there. I'm looking at weighted driving accuracy, weighted birdies or better, and I'm looking at a year-long strokes gained field differential. So a lot of these guys have played various strengths of field. I mean, you look at a Brooks, at Bryson, go down the list at like a Phil, say Tony Finau there, Rory Sabatini, and then you go down the middle of the list and you really got some no names with, Peter Malnati has played a mostly weak schedule this year, Lebioda, Straka, Austin Cook, etc. So getting a strokes gained field differential that we have for the rolling stats gives me a better picture of how these guys have played with similar field strengths. So I definitely like using that, and that's for a full year, not just for like the last couple events. I like to look at a bigger picture consistency-wise there.
Okay.
So what about you? I mean, it seems like it's pretty straightforward. Again, we don't have course history besides the Champions Tour, which again I understand is not that easy to like get behind and say this is really helping me predict who's going to play well this week. But yeah, I mean it seems pretty straightforward. I think a little nod to the drivers just because of the length, and some of the dog legs. I think hitting it in play and hitting it long is crucial. So like the off the tee portion. And all the other stuff is pretty much standard. I mean, approach, green regulation, birdies are better for this type of track. It seems pretty straightforward in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think it should be a fairly easy course. There is, as you mentioned earlier, a considerable more amount of, hazards that could cause problems. I think you alluded to.
Yeah, 27 that come into play.
Yeah, 27 water hazards that come into play. Now, looking over, if you look at the Google Maps view of it, a lot of the water comes into play in the form of like, a pond that's or a lake or whatever they are, however big they may be, or, in front of tee boxes, or something to that extent where it's not necessarily in play unless you just shank it, which these guys shouldn't do off the tee.
Those aren't in play.
But what I did notice is that there are a decent amount of fairway bunkers, as well as a lot of bunkering around the greens in general. Now, granted, the greens are larger than PGA Tour average, which I think goes hand in hand with your sort of dropping down of the approach importance this week, just because hitting those greens is not going to be as difficult as it normally may be.
There's actually, like, talking about bunkers, I mean, water hazards to me are more penalizing than bunkers for these guys, but for record, I do have on count 72 bunkers that come into play, so still a good number.
Yeah, nearly 100 hazards between water and bunkers, of course, and then that's not really taking into consideration any native areas or rough or anything like that. So I do think I agree with your takes on off the tee, of course, and then weighted driving accuracy. But I'm really I haven't been able to do it just yet, but I want to look at some approach categories, some approach buckets for these holes, and just see approach ranges. Maybe I won't put as much weight into my overall approach percentage, but try and look at approach buckets a little bit more. That's something I think I'm going to try and have ready for the live stream on Wednesday. But one other thing that I will be looking at, and really it's just for the last week's course, and this is maybe put a little bit more emphasis on putting. I know putting in its own right is, hard to predict, certainly, but maybe guys that are trending up in putting, looking at splits from baseline to bent grass, not making crazy decisions on them, but certainly having that, in your peripheral when you're choosing between one or two guys in a price range. I certainly think I'm going to be taking that into consideration a little bit more. I mean, essentially last week was a putting contest. Everybody was hitting it in the fairway and hitting on a green, and then it just came down to who was making putts. So I think this week will be very similar to that. And I definitely think that it's worth taking that into consideration.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I think I brought this up on numerous occasions now, at least since just before the U.S. Open, with guys that have been putting poorly have been kind of continuing to putt poorly, and guys that putt well. We look at showdown stuff, like we talk about showdown stuff. They're not gaining 4 strokes putting every single round, but they've normalized into positive strokes gained putters, and that's something I haven't added into my model. Just looking through it, and it kind of makes sense. I haven't, right now we have, let's see. Yeah, so I can look at the bent grass strokes gain differentials, and just adding a little bump to that might weed out some guys that putt poorly on bent or have historically putted worse on bent than any other surface. And again, you're not making decisions off of it, but just kind of the same point that I mentioned with using green regulation. Obviously approach, I think everyone uses every single week, but if you try to find some of these stats where they may not be really important to you that week, but it at least gives a little bump up to guys that, have been respectable in that category, and it gives an extra bump down to guys that have been even worse. Yeah. I think that helps quite a bit. And a perfect example of that, because I'm sure a guy that I might actually jump onto this week, and I've been skeptical the last couple weeks, and which has been great because he's been missing a lot of cuts. But Adam Svensson, I mean, I'm sure he pops for a lot of people in their models, and he's just a terrible putter. And there's no amount of good ball striking that can get me onto somebody, just off of that. You have to show me strokes gained totals. You still have to show me you're getting the ball in the hole relative to the field. So maybe adding that bent grass strokes gained split gives him enough bump down, just as a, hypothetical, where he's not as high up in my model. He's not going to be 88 percentile or something. So just a thought. I mean, there's a lot of stats that I think are beneficial in our mainstays every single week. I'll just name strokes gained off the tee, approach, etc. But I'm sure there's some, and I use that strokes gained field differential, strokes gained, or the weighted green regulation, and now you brought up the putting, and those are really good points where if you add those to your model, you're not saying I need the best of this category, but by weighing it slightly, you're bumping guys down that are poor in that category, which helps your model as a whole. So that's a really good point. I probably should add putting a little bit just in recent form, just to get an idea of who, just to bump down the guys that have been putting poorly a little bit, just to give a more realistic, picture there.
Yeah, and I think Svensson is a perfect example. If you look at the rolling stats, everything really up until his strokes gained putting metrics, tee to green, approach, off the tee, ball striking, last 3 events, Rocket Mortgage, Travelers, and the Canadian Open for him. Rocket Mortgage and Canadian were just solid events from him in those areas. Travelers was positive in pretty much all of them, and then you look over at putting, and he's losing over 2 strokes in 2 of those events, and almost a quarter of a stroke in the one in between. So you can see that trend that putting is not getting better for him. Certainly he's hitting the ball well off the tee. He's getting it to the green, but then when he gets there, he can't do anything with it. So
yeah. There's 2 sides of that. So I'm not telling anyone to play him or not play him, just based on that alone. But I mean, he's getting cheaper. His ball striking stats have been pretty good. Like, just looking at last week's results, he led the field in strokes gained approach and various proximity ranges. Like, I think he led the field in proximity inside of 24 feet. Like, that's pretty impressive. Obviously, he missed the cut, so he only has 2 rounds. But when you start looking at putting, I mean, you still need guys that are going to score. Like, don't get too hung up on just who's doing really well in strokes gained approach. So like I'm looking through it now. It actually bumps Svensson down because he's actually worse on bent, which is ironic that we brought him up. But I mean, he's still at 6,300. He's worth a shot. I mean, that was someone we talked about last week. We really liked Doc Redman. That was cheaper, and he had been playing so well on the web.com, and it made a lot of sense. And Svensson, we've seen on the PGA Tour, tee to green, been playing really well. Not doing it with the putter, but at 6,300. Dude, he's not very far off from making some cuts and paying off at 6,300. If a week comes where he actually like gains a half a stroke putting for the week, we're in business. So I just kind of want to give that as a bigger picture. I mean, obviously we're big. I've been playing golf my whole life, big into stats and looking at stuff like that. But at the end of the day, you still need guys that are golfing. And people joke on Twitter about strokes gained golf shots, but it's still true. Like, just look at Svensson. He's grading out better than anybody, but he's not getting the job done. So I know that was a little rant and spiel there, but I think that is beneficial if people are, just focusing on those ball striking stats, which are important. Use some of those kind of, those stats people don't really think about, or they don't think they're the best, because it helps you make your pool a little bit more well-rounded. So I'm actually adding putting in right now. So that'll probably help me out and see if any of these people move.
And just one last thing on Svensson. If you look at his past results, it's like 6 straight missed cuts, but 5 of those, last week he missed it on the number, which if everyone remembers, the cut jumped to 5 under, within the last hour.
Yep.
So he shot 4 under, which, at any other standard event, that would be fine, where the winning score isn't 25 or whatever it was. The week before, he missed the Travelers by 2 shots. I don't know the exact cut on that one as well, but I think it was fairly high, 3 or 4 under, maybe 3. He missed the Canadian Open on the number. He missed Wells Fargo on the number. So he's not, missing this by insane amounts. To say that he's playing poorly and continuously playing poorly is not an accurate representation.
Yep. Yeah, I agree.
So, I'm done on Svensson. Sorry.
I know. For a $6,300 guy, hopefully people got benefit from that, though. I certainly did, because not going to go into any more detail, but that's a good representation of kind of how you should be researching every week and using your model to benefit you, not just to do, the staple of what everyone else does. That's not the point. So let's go ahead and lead off, man. Let's go ahead and get through these guys. We've talked enough on the golf course that we will see come Thursday. Of course, we'll have our final thoughts on Wednesday night on the FGB live stream. You can find us at twitch.tv/Redkacheek, and that'll be at 9 p.m. Eastern. And in the last couple weeks, we've been doing the Showdown show on Saturday nights to big success. I know Papa Wolf had another good Sunday, and guys on the U.S. Open, because I missed last week for that golf tournament, but the U.S. Open, guys had a big Sunday again, talking through kind of how to strategize, stuff like that. So looking forward to doing that again Saturday night. You can find all that, kind of the schedule of content, I guess. You can find that at fantasygolfbag.com. You can sign up and find these tools that we mentioned, and of course our articles that we write up each week. So let's go ahead and dive into it, man. Let's give these people some names, because, starting off, with the high end, again, like last week, you got, the DJ talk with Matsuyama. This week, Brooks is back in the field. Matsuyama's even more expensive than he was last week, which is a completely different story than I was talking about last week. But go ahead and give me your thoughts, man. I know these guys, they're studs for a reason. They're all going to grade out well. But is there a lean for you in this field? Is this a week to kind of pay up for one of these guys? Or are we going to try to stay more balanced? I know you like to stay balanced, but what are you leaning so far?
So normally I would probably fade this whole range because like you said, I do tend to lean balanced. It didn't help last week when I finally paid up for DJ and he missed the cut, and the whole rest of my team that I was more concerned about than DJ certainly, finished all of them 12 under or better. But I have some real concern about Koepka at 11-9, and it really doesn't have anything to do with how he's playing per se, but I think we really need to start considering his performance in events like this. I saw the last event he played, I believe it was Travelers, and somebody had posted on Twitter that they were at the driving range and he showed up like 10 minutes before his tee time, hit like 5 balls, and then Art was like, all right, let's roll. And I don't know if I don't think that's normal. You could speak to that a little bit more. Maybe he doesn't feel that he has to do that.
Yeah, it's not normal.
But that's, at some point, the way that he performs in these lesser fields, it has to be more than, it has to be more. We have to make more of it than we have in the past. Certainly, people are talking about it, but they still play him because he's Brooks, and he, the hope is that it's just talk. But I don't know. I probably won't play him this week. I'm definitely leaning towards like a day. Really kind of liking Bryson at 10-5. And then Reed. So really the lower 10K range, those 3 guys, Day, DeChambeau, and Reed are really drawing my interest more than either Matsuyama or Koepka up here.
Yeah, I think Brooks' price helps a little bit. So I'm kind of taking a different perspective on Brooks this week. I think this is actually a good golf course for him. One, it benefits him off the tee because he can hit drivers. And because like at the Travelers, he didn't get to hit as many drivers as he probably would have liked. It's obviously the week after a major. He's probably just torched. But I actually do like Brooks this week. I think this is a decent track for him. 11-9 is steep, but I think that'll actually help his ownership a bit. Like last week we talked about Matsuyama. I think he was right at 10K or just above 10K, something like that. And then DJ was at this Brooks price. And to me, that didn't make sense. Like Hideki, I could use that savings, $1,800 savings, I think it was, for Matsuyama over DJ, and it ended up working out really well. This week, with those guys getting priced up there, like Patrick Reed's at 10K, Bryson at 10.5, Jason A 10.9, Hideki 11.11 or 11.1. I think Brooks is worth the play this week. Of all the weeks, in a normal event, I like him quite a bit on this type of golf course. I know we just got burned by a DJ. Most people played him last week, and most expensive guy, and got burned. But I really do. I think Brooks, this is a good setup for him. I think he is starting to hear more of the noise around him not caring in these normal events. And honestly, I'm not paying a lot of attention to that narrative. But I do. Like if you had to pick, like throw these guys in a bucket, and they're all within $2,000 of each other, I'll take Brooks this week over, even Hideki, Jason Day. I do have Bryson DeChambeau interest at 10.5. I think that's a fair price in this field. You just look at the 9K guys and you can tell this is really weird pricing for sure. But so I'm leaning towards playing Brooks this week at 11.9. I'm going to try to, use that narrative to my advantage. 11.9, the pricing probably helps that a little bit. And then if I don't pay up for Brooks, if I were to pay over 10K, it would be Bryson. And Not to say those other guys are not bad, like we talked about Patrick Reed last week, but again, you got to look at the relativity of the pricing. Mm-hmm. I think Bryson stands out as a better value there. And then if I had to pay up, I think Brooks is. This is a good spot for Brooks. I'll take a hot take and we'll see how it rides out. But as of now, man, I'm going to play some Brooks.
You know what he probably did is he probably created this idea that he doesn't care about it just so he can use it as like poster board material. Probably
motivation. Then he got pissed or something.
Yeah.
But I mean, every one of these guys grades out really well. I think Brooks grades out a lot better than the others for me, for what I'm using. But I do think this is a good setup for him. Off the tee should be a benefit. His irons have actually been really good since the U.S. Open. So I'm just going to pay up. I think this is a week. And I haven't looked at the win equity. I know I usually talk about that on the Roto Grinders show, but let me pull it up real fast. I have to imagine the win equity for these top 5 guys is up there. Let me pull it up real fast. It's loading. Yeah, so in the top 5, we got just under 40% win equity out of those top 5 guys. So, and 25% of that is Brooks. So yeah, I'll be taking Brooks this week.
All right. Fair enough.
Let's go ahead and hop down to the 9K. I mean, it's these I think are a worth discussion point. So I'm trying to whittle through these guys that are just shocking prices. Even last week, I wasn't as shocked to see a Neiman at 8-9, but now all of a sudden, Hovland, Sungjae, Streelman, Neiman again, Roy Sabatini, they're all priced around Tony Finau. Would you have thought that last year? So, for me, just looking through kind of the recent form, stuff like that, I'm not sure I can get on board with a Hovland with his good run. I feel like this will be the time to take a step back if he's going to gain more and more ownership. So I would probably go to the guys that are maybe going to be less popular. First off, right off the bat would be a Tony Finau. I assume he'll get less ownership, slightly less ownership than a Hovland. I don't think this is the greatest course for Neiman, so I'll probably avoid him this week. But out of the guys over 9K, I mean, I think between Finau and Hovland, those are really the two that I'm looking at. I think Finau will be the ownership leverage, and neither one are great plays over another. But I'm not paying up for Rory Sabatini. No thanks. Joaquin Neiman has been playing really well. We've been playing him every week for a while now.
Yeah.
I don't think this is the greatest course for him. 7,400 yards for his style, I don't think is a big benefit. Hovland's plenty long enough, so I do like him. But I think Finau's the sneakier one there. I mean, $3,000 cheaper than Brooks, relative, thinking that way. I think that's a pretty good price.
Yeah, so compared to last week's, guys like Horschel were in the same range. And, he ended up playing pretty well. But just to see, like you said, see names like Neiman, Hovland, even M, although that's a little bit more palatable just because how consistent he's been. Still, though, 9K for, Sungjae, where we're normally used to seeing him, 7.5 to 8.5 is a little tough to swallow. But I do think you're correct on the Finau take. Neiman, back-to-back top 5s. Hovland with that really crazy round on Sunday. He's the new shiny toy, the Cam Champ 2.0. But I do like Finau. I obviously won't be going to Sabatini, but I might honestly just skip this range entirely and go down to the 8s because I've got a lot more interest in the 8s, especially if I start up top with somebody like Day or DeChambeau, or even if I decide to roll with Brooks on the top end. But
yeah, that's also a good point. If I hit Brooks, I'm probably skipping this range completely.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Yeah, and just to kind of wrap a bow around that side too, honestly, I don't think I'm going to play anyone in there besides, I mentioned Finau over Hovland, but I do like Hovland this week. I think Finau will be the leverage play if you had to grab one in that range, it just seems like he sticks out. He sticks out less than a Hovland coming off of his good form. But I think this is a great course for Hovland. Like, I haven't checked his odds, but I would probably bet it if he's, under 50, but over 30, 35 or something like that. So, yeah, we'll leave it there. I think, again, I'm looking at course fit a little bit for these guys, and I can only see Finau playing here well and Hovland playing here well. I think the other guys get limited a little bit on the distance aspect. So let's go ahead and hit the 8K range a little bit more normal, I guess. Ryan Moore gets a price drop after the miscut $800 drop. We got Keegan there, Streelman. So I'll let you lead off here in the 8K range. Who's your go-tos here?
So this might be a week that's a Keegan week for me. I sort of cringe as I say that, but I, really looking through his numbers, we obviously know that he's tee to green, ball striking, all those things. I'm curious to see if this Travelers putting performance, at first glance it's an anomaly, but I don't know if I truly buy that. He's not a great putter, we know that, but these big greens, I don't know. I'm more likely to play him this week than I would any other week. I'll just say that.
Yeah, I don't mind Keegan this week. I don't think he's going to be gaining 2 strokes around putting or 3 strokes around putting, whatever it was at the Travelers, but we know his ball striking is there. I think his price tag's fine. So as I say that, I'm trying to think through how this golf course is going to play, and it's probably going to turn into a putting contest. So even with it being longer, I think guys, we'll say a Brooks, gets a little bit of advantage there. He hits enough good iron shots. He should have a lot of putts for birdie. It becomes who can make the most putts. That being said, Keegan can hit it as close as he wants all day. He's still, I still don't see him. He may not gain strokes putting for another month or two. So I'm a little hesitant there. I think he's fine. He's in my player pool right now. I'll probably play him, but it is a little bit concerning if you think about this course should supposedly play, 20 under par for a winning score. Can he keep that up? I don't know if he can with his putter.
No, it makes sense. I like him out.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, he grades out really well for me. I'm just saying, just trying to talk through how this course will play, just because we know Keegan is not a good putter.
And we talked about putting.
Correct. So yeah, just trying to think through, even if he hits the ball as well as he has, can his putter keep up? And that's probably the question mark. I think I'm totally fine going back there, 8,800, but yeah, just something to bring up because, maybe try to correlate that lineup with somebody. If you take a Keegan that's a bad putter, take him with Svensson, who's a bad putter. Mm-hmm. Maybe they both can click on the same week. So anyone else here? I don't want to try to beat a dead horse with some of these guys, but I do think Keegan's a fine play this week.
I really like Kevin Na, 8,600. Just in general, I've grown a little bit, more accustomed to playing him. He hits the ball well. His numbers statistically, approach numbers, off the tee, is all really solid. He's a good putter too. So this feels like a Kevin Na course to me. It's, a little bit longer, but he's shown that, that really isn't a huge factor for him, certainly. Moving down, Charles Howell at 8,400. I want to play, but it was brutal watching his last 2 rounds putting. His approach numbers are always, for the most part, pretty solid. But just, he got out to a good lead, played well the first 2 days, and then just couldn't do anything the last 2 days, and really just kind of fell back. You got Lashley there, your winner from last week. I'm interested to see what your thoughts about going back to him are.
Yeah, obviously he played really good. It's a bit concerning with the price jump and the increased ownership. 8,300. Just looking through his numbers, I mean, he was, I think, third in the field last week, strokes gained approach, which, I mean, makes sense because he won the event. All his proximity numbers look really good, but we've seen kind of some of these pop and go away in 1 week spans. I will probably play him 8,300. I think this is an okay course for him. Again, it seems forgiving, like he's not drastically changing a style golf course like he saw last week, and now all of a sudden it's tight, narrow, and he's playing Pebble Beach or something like that. So I think Lashley's fine. The Charles Howell's probably one I'll go back to. I know you talked about his putting woes last week on the weekend, but if you look through his off the tee numbers and look through even his rounds last week, just strictly off the tee, that's something that I was going to bring up in the live stream for this upcoming week. Is we talk about Sunday Showdown, we look at round by round, looking at guys that are kind of going the right direction or the wrong direction. I'm going to try to do that a little bit more with a few guys on Wednesday night going into the week, just to see someone that maybe, like a Reed that we talked about, I think 2 or 3 weeks ago, he had been so bad. So anyone that runs a stat model over a 3 to 6 month period of time is not going to see him. But if you start looking into smaller samples, they start to pop. And I think Charles Howell is headed that way. His off the tee numbers look really good. He's coming back to bent grass. I think this is a good surface for him. So Charles Howell III, kind of in short, I guess. I think 8,400 for him. I think he's headed the right direction. 46% of his shots inside of 24 feet last week. Off the tee numbers were good. I think this is a good golf course for Charles Howell.
Okay. My last guy down here is actually Brian Harman at 8K. Missed the cut last week, but it was on the numbers, so 4 under. And really, I think he made a chargeback on that day to get to 4 under, if I recall correctly. But, looking at some rolling stats, tee to green is, positive his last 4 events. Really solid numbers off the tee. Approach numbers are solid. His putting, which is what he's sort of known for, he struggled a little bit, lost a little under a stroke putting last week. But I like Harmon at this. I think he'll go a little bit overlooked in this range. Certainly right above, the likes of Morikawa and Watney and a lot of these guys in the 7K range that I think will be popular. But Brian Harmon at 8K, I kind of like that play.
Yeah, I can't ride Brian Harmon with you. I, again, kind of like the Neiman side of things. I don't think this is a great track for him. I won't be playing any Brian Harmon. The only guys I'm really looking to here, I'm trying to pull up the traditional stuff for more. Obviously, we've been playing him for most of the events he's played this year, at least I have. And he's gotten priced up now. He got priced up last week, and I played him again. He missed the cut. Looking through just his recent numbers, I mean, driving distance isn't very good. That's not ideal. But I just cannot. His approach numbers don't look good. I'll probably have a sprinkle of Ryan Moore in that $5. I told you I probably will end up running a few more entries in that just because of the way the field's structured, but I'm certainly not hopping off the train on Ryan Moore. I know we're about to get to another fun one in a second, but I mean, his stats don't look good, but for a guy that, for what I saw 2 months ago up until now, I can't hop off a Ryan Moore. He's a good player. I'm at a loss for words of what's going on with him the last 2 weeks, killing me, but yeah, I will play him. Outside of that, I think that's pretty much it. I probably will have a sprinkle of Mickelson just because he's Mickelson on a course where I think he could pull out driver, and if he hits it well, he could really go low. But I don't think I'm interested in anyone else. Hadwin, you didn't mention him. I'm not going to play Hadwin. Harmon, I'm not interested in. And Berger, we haven't seen enough from him to play. So I'll just have a sprinkle of some of those guys, and my highest ownership will probably be Charles Howell.
You want to kick off the 7Ks for us?
Let's kick off the 7Ks. Let's go straight to the guy that has burned all of us at least once in the last 2 weeks. That's Mr. Charlie Hoffman at 7,800. Missed the cut again last week. But his numbers, again, his approach numbers, his ball striking numbers all look good. I'll pull up a few of his traditional stats here just to have them for a reference. But yeah, looking through his numbers, he hit, let's see, over 40% of his shots inside of 24 feet. He hit almost 10% of his shots inside of 6 feet, and he obviously only played 2 rounds because he missed the cut. But, I mean, he was on the verge of playing really well and just didn't do it. Driving distance is high enough for this golf course, so he fits that kind of requirement for me. Driving accuracy is certainly up and down, but green regulation numbers have been really stable. So I don't see any reason not to play Charlie Hoffman again this week, besides him losing the 4 strokes putting or whatever it was on Thursday or Friday. But yeah, Charlie Hoffman, 7,800. I will be back to play him, hopefully at decreased ownership. Yeah, that's all I got to say there. I mean, I'm not jumping off Charlie Hoffman just to watch him, T10 this week. Yeah. The other 2 around there that I'm probably most interested in, Cameron Tringali off the last couple of events, I'm still interested to play. He is certainly a longer hitter on tour, very streaky. I won't have a ton of him, but I do think he's a better fit in this golf course than like a Peter Malnati that people will play. JJ Spawn popped a little bit last week, so I'm curious if you have any thoughts on him. But the other one down there that I'm going to give a shot to is Danny Lee, 7,600. I mean, his approach numbers were just off the charts last week. Similar to what we saw a couple weeks ago with somebody we mentioned, and they popped, and I forget who it was. It might have been Straka right before he went on the run, or it was like Tringali before the Canadian Open, but Danny Lee is a super interesting play to me there in the kind of higher 7K range.
I love me some Danny Lee. I played him in Showdown actually on Sunday, and he ended up, I think, finishing like 3 under for the day or something. But it's exactly what you said. His approach game is just through the charts, and this is the same Danny Lee that we saw last year at the Players, where he just sort of came out of nowhere. He'll go on hot streaks with his irons, but when his irons are on, he puts himself in positions to, drop a T10 or a T5. And we're seeing that right now. And, I really, really, really like the Danny Lee call at 7,600. I know you mentioned Spawn at 78. I had a little bit of Spawn last week. Really good to see that, consistency for him this event, and I think the one before as well, the Travelers. Let me just check his finishes real quick. Yeah, so 13th last week, 30th at the Travelers, 44th at Canadian. So we're progressively getting better. T15 last week, and he had a really strong Sunday as well. I think he was 5 or 6 under. Finished it as like last 6 holes, 5 birdies out of 6 or something. So, really, really like Spawn at 7,800. Honestly, there are a ton of guys in this 7K range that I don't have any issue playing with. Lucas Glover at 7,700 to me is just everybody's getting priced up in this field except for Lucas Glover. I mean, granted, he is of the Keegan mold, that his ball striking and tee to green game is so solid from week to week, and we just know that it's the putter that holds him back. But I don't mind Lucas Glover at 7,700. A couple other guys that I like. I'll go back to the well on Gooch at 7,600. I played him as well last week. Really after coming back from that wrist injury, I think that he had at the Honda or around that time of the year, he has really sort of come back in full force. He 17th last week Before that, 35th Canadian. Missed the cut at Memorial, but then 29th at Charles Schwab. And that was his sort of reappearance after the wrist injury that he had. So I really don't mind Gooch at all, 7,600. And then, I got some more low 7K guys, but I could really go on a number of them in the 7K range. I like the 7K range a lot.
Yeah, the 7K seems the most normal priced, I think. The one guy I didn't mention there that I have quite a lot of interest in, or a good bit, we'll say a good bit in this type of field, is Jason Duffner at 7,700. If you look through his numbers, they've been pretty stellar. He missed the cut last week, but everything lines up great. I mean, his approach numbers were near the top of the field, actually. And, I mean, he hit... oh, man. He hit... Let's see. Where's Lashley at? Yeah, so he hit 30% more shots inside of 6 feet than Lashley did. Lashley played 4 rounds versus a 2 for Duffner. But, yeah, I mean, that's a huge difference. I think Duffner has a ton of upside this week, and I'll be playing him a decent bit. It's like 77. You look at his price and his stats relative to, like, you mentioned Harmon and had one above him. It doesn't make sense to me. So, yeah, Duffner I'll probably have a healthy serving of.
Okay. You want to jump into this low range?
Yeah, we can. Again, yeah, there's a lot of guys to pick from. So, like, once you get to, like, the mid 7Ks and then start hopping down here, I think they're all in decent shape to play. I'll go and kind of hit a couple of these guys real quick, just guys I have interest in for sake of time. I'm okay going back to Jimmy Walker this week. I think these fairways for his style is okay. He can manage it. Sepp Straka continues to play really well. Totally fine going back to Mr. Sepp Straka. And going down a little bit further, I think this will be a week that I'll jump back on Matthew Wolff. I didn't think he was a great fit last week. He did play better on Friday, but I see this as a better golf course, kind of from a scoring aspect for him. Hopefully he's got some things straightened out from the last couple events, but I do think Matthew Wolff's a good play this week, 7,300. And then Sam Burns there again at 7,300 is another guy that we have seen make a ton of birdies. He's, like, if you look through his straight approach numbers, they're not great, but when you start looking into his scorecards and seeing, how many birdies he's making in a tournament, that's the kind of stuff you want to see, especially for a cheaper guy like 7,300. So I think Sam Burns there is totally fine. Doc Redman again, we talked about last week, 7,200. I'll certainly be playing again this week. No surprise there. His ownership will be a little bit higher, so if you're that type of GPP player, maybe take that into perspective. But I still don't see it getting like over 12% or something like that. And outside of that, I think that's it. I'll probably have some Max Homa, and then from there I'll drop down to the 6K range. So any of those I kind of overlap with you, or anyone different that I might have missed for you?
I do like Homa. I wasn't on him last week, but I believe, the week before. So I think an even 7K is a good price for him. A few other guys that I don't mind going back to. I like the Jimmy Walker call. I also like Matt Hughes there at 7,400. He just consistently seems to find his way, inching up leaderboards. I know he's, last few events, 21st last week, 51st at Travelers, 14th Canadian, 8th at Charles Schwab. So certainly he's been playing really well. I could definitely go back to him at 7,400. I like that price on him a lot. And then I am on the fence about Dylan Fratelli at 7,200.
I just quit playing him, man.
I know. And then he goes and he gets up to 10 under or something through the second.
He still doesn't do anything.
And honestly, I looked at it, and everything is good but approach, and it's just he makes putts, he hits the ball in the fairways, but he can't do anything with his irons. And I saw last week's performance and thought, you know what, he's playing well. I can't believe I didn't play him. That was my first thought. But looking into it a little bit more, I want to play him, but I just, like you said, when we're looking for trends for guys that are like turning the corner back, this one event, the few rounds, it might not do it for me. Certainly if you're doing a lot of lineups, then maybe consider it, but it would be difficult for me to fit him in, especially in that same range as guys. Yeah. You mentioned Redmond, 72.
I don't think you need him. I don't think you need to force him in. He's not going to – I don't think he grades out better than anyone, and I don't think he really has shown any upside. His ownership won't be that high where you're not going to get burned if you win. So, yeah, I don't really see a reason to go there, to keep wasting money on him. That's kind of I've come to that conclusion after like 3 events this spring. I made $0 on all those events on him in lineup. So, yeah, no Dylan Fratelli for me.
All right. Well, that's all I got.
Sweet.
For the 7s. You want me to kick off this 6 range?
I know you really like this range, so let me just hit my high points real quick, and then I'll let you kind of finish off this range with your spots, and then we'll get these people out of here. So I'm going to go right back to the well on Hank Lebioda at 6,900. I think he is totally fine. There's Adam Long at 6,800. So I think he might go under the radar. He'll be one of my kind of pivot plays, I guess. I mentioned him last week, so nothing has really changed from liking him last week. He lost a little bit of strokes off the tee at the Rocket Mortgage Classic. I think mainly from the way the golf course was set up for him, not being able to hit his driver as much. So he still gained, let's see, like against the field, Adam Long gained a stroke around on approach, 8 or 9% of shots inside of 6 feet, 51% of shots inside of 24 feet. So I think Adam Long is a really sneaky play. So I'll be going to play some Adam Long this week. I wish he was a little bit cheaper, but I mean, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
I'm not really going to chase a Ted Potter. Anyone else can have that. That's totally fine. Sebastian Munoz at 6,700. He's been playing really consistent. He was the one we mentioned with Cameron Tringali at the RBC Canadian Open, and he was like 5th place for a little while, I think, or he may have finished 5th. I can't remember, but he's been playing really well. I think he's had like 4 or 5 straight made cuts, and his approach numbers still look pretty good. So I'm sorry, he missed the cut last week, but prior to that, he had like 4 or 5 made cuts. But I'm still going to go back to him. He's a guy that gets it going low. A very popular Pat Mayo first-round lead bet. So if this golf course gets going and guys start shooting low early, I would love to have the first-round leader as an outright or in my DK lineups, because I think if, like we saw Lashley last week, if they can kind of get off to a good start and not necessarily get ahead early, but if they can get off to a good start, 5, 6, 7 under on day 1, maybe shoot 6, 7 on day 2, they're pretty much in the ballpark to win this thing. And that's what you want right off the bat, a guy that can get low pretty quick. So, and he's long. I think Sebastian Munoz is one of the longer hitters in this range. Roger Sloan's down there. I probably will have a sprinkle, but not a ton. He was one of our showdown candidates on Sunday. We talked about in the live stream, and he shot like 4 or 5 under, so definitely got the job done. But he's so inconsistent. Not sure how much I'm going to really pay into that. And then we mentioned Svensson at the top of the show. Again, gained almost 2 strokes on approach for each of his 2 rounds. I'm probably going to have to dip down here if I'm going to play some Brooks this week, which I plan to. Svensson looks like the guy most likely to make the cut. So like in our FGB survey, he'll probably be my vote because, like you said, he missed it on the number last week, and his approach numbers are like right there. Man, Svensson, just let's get it together, buddy.
All right. So a couple of guys that you hit on in this range I do like also. Lebioda being the first there at 6,900. I do like that play a lot. I had Adam Long written down as well. I think those were the primary 2 that we both sort of agree on. A couple other guys that I'm I'm a little bit interested in. I'm probably saying this name wrong, but Alex Prue, 6,700. Is that right?
Yep. Yeah, you got it.
I don't mind that play at all. I don't know how long of a player he is. I don't know if you can speak to that or not. But,
Prue? Prue's not very long.
Not very long.
No, that was kind of between him and Shank.
Okay.
I'm not really interested in playing either. Like, I kind of fit. I can pull up their numbers real quick, but like Shank, Armour, and Prue are in the same kind of category of hit a lot of greens. Approach numbers are decent, but their driving distance isn't great. Actually, Shank's numbers are okay. So probably just Prue and I'll just pull up Prue since you mentioned Prue. No, I was wrong. Prue has good driving distance numbers.
Yeah.
Who was my other one? Who did I say? One of these I have confused, and I need to figure that out before I make my lineups this week.
Munoz, is he long? Is that who you said?
He's long. Don't make me backtrack on Munoz.
No. I'm not. I'm just tossing names out that you said. I'm certain.
Yeah. He's been averaging over 300 yards in half of his events, and the others are right at 290. Sorry, he's been averaging over 300 every single event, but like 3. I think it was it Armour? I think it was Armour.
I know he's shorter.
Yeah, it was Armour. Sorry, he averages like 270 off the tee. Sorry, I take it back. It was Armour short. Shank is fine. Prue is fine.
Yeah, no, I like Prue. He has been looking really good. Gaining positive strokes, tee to green, off the tee, approach. Last few events, I think he was the one that kind of sneakily showed up at the U.S. Open. Let me find it real quick. He missed the cut last week, but before that, 20th at the Travelers, 21st at the U.S. Open. So there that is. And at 6,700, I think that is very reasonable. This is a course where, a lot of guys, you might have to do a double take on the leaderboard, same as it was last week.
Yeah.
So I could certainly see any number of these, 6K guys, popping. And we're going to take chances down here for some stars and scrubs. I think Prue is definitely a solid option at 6,700. I have got a little interest in Teeter at 6,500. I know his form coming in is pretty solid. He finished 35th last week, 36th at Travelers, 63rd at Canadian, and then 17th at Charles Schwab. So I don't mind Teeter at 6,500 at all. Most of that is just looking at form coming in. I think these type of events where the items that we're looking at to really nail down our guys are you don't gain as much leverage against the field by narrowing those. Whereas it's definitely a bomb and gouge course, or it's definitely a accuracy course, or one of those things lends to one player or another. This event, last week's event, it's really just it equals the playing field. I know there was conversation about, like, in our Slack earlier. If you're not in our premium Slack, make sure to get over to Fantasy Golf Bag. Throw that plug in there. But there was some conversation in there about going high with the higher price guys and about how this type of field event evens it out to some extent. Now, there's still merit to playing those higher price guys, but their leverage over the field compared to other events is lessened because it's an easier course, and there are guys that are just going to have crazy rounds like Lashley last week and just go wire to wire. So that being said,
less mistakes can be made. So it minimizes the elite guys that minimize those mistakes because all you're doing is making 9 birdies around.
Exactly. So all that being said, I like Teeter at 65, and then one last guy, and you're gonna knock me on this one because he's not long off the tee. But Brian Gay at 6,400. If this is going to be a putting contest, I don't mind playing Brian Gay at 6,400. His long irons are generally pretty solid, and so he can get away with not hitting it very long off the tee. That's all I got on Brian Gay. So.
Okay. Yeah, I won't be playing any Brian Gay, but go have fun. I'll just take Svensson. I'll just give that a try. All right, we ran a little bit over on time, but we appreciate you guys hanging in there. I think that's all I got. I think that's all Jacob's got. So we'll get you guys out of here. Let's hope you have a great week building your lineups. Of course, check out the Euro podcast if you haven't. Hopefully you haven't already. Hopefully this was the priority. But go back into iTunes or Google, wherever, and find the Euro one. It should be a bit shorter than this one, but it'll highlight the field guys to look for the link style courses that you'll see over there for the Irish Open. And of course, you can find myself on Twitter at Redkacheek. The Twitter handle for Fantasy Golf Bag is at Fantasy Golf Bag, and then Jacob is at JkrayASU. So we'll let you guys go. Have a fantastic week. Find us over at fantasygolfbag.com. And let's have some more big weeks for the rest, or more big winners for this week going into the British Open. So, see ya.